The Talk of Raleigh. Provocative. The Talk of Raleigh. In focus with issues that directly affect our listeners in the Raleigh and surrounding areas. Join us now for The Talk of Raleigh, live on AM 750 WAUG and TV 68. The Talk of Raleigh.
The topic is the black male, are we an endangered species? Hello, I'm Ron Lewis, the host of The Talk of Raleigh, and my host for today is Mr. Jay Holloway. I'm so used to being Mike from here, I forgot today we switched up, Jay. Okay, our topic for today is the black male, are we an endangered species? There are more black males in jails than in college. The divorce rate for couples is more than 50%, so that leaves more Afro-American females heading the household. All right, more and more black males are dying from homicide and drugs, and here are some additional statistics. Homicide rate for black males ages 15 to 24 have increased by 40% since 1984, and now is the leading cause of death for this group. Urban black males face a 1 in 10 chance of being killed in their lifetime as compared to a 1 in 80 chance by their white male counterparts. In their lifetime, nearly 10,000 blacks, mostly males, are killed by handguns each year. 23% of the black male from ages 20 to 29 are in the country's law enforcement system. By that, of course, we mean incarceration, either probation or paroled. 1 out of 4 black male is involved in the judicial system in their lifetime. We have in the WAUG studios with us an all African-American male audience to talk about this challenging issue that's facing the black male, and hopefully we can come up with some possible solutions. If you'd like to give us a call WAUG 860-WAUG 860-WAUG. Jay.
Well, Ron, I think those statistics that you gave earlier are statistics that we hear quite often in larger media. And quite often you don't get a chance to hear the other side of the story, hear people question those statistics and hear different viewpoints. And perhaps WAUG, as an African-American owned radio and TV station, we will be able to give you some viewpoints from persons directly in this demographic, this all-African male audience. Tony Brown wrote an article, and I will share this with you as well. He also cited those statistics in his article. But he also said in the same article that they also are half-truths, that many of them are misleading, and that if the adjective poor was added in front, that indeed African-American males, poor African-American males may be endangered. Here's another statistic to add to that, that of black African males who are under the age of 18, in 1987, over 45% of them were in poverty. Also, another interesting statistic is that, and I'm going to quote this from Tony Brown, and he got this from Fortune magazine. He says, "Don't tell anybody I told you, but more than 3/4 of black men earn middle-class incomes." And this is his source from Fortune magazine. I think we'll be talking about these issues and some others from this dynamic local audience here from Raleigh, all African-American males, and I look forward to that challenge.
Yes, we certainly shall, Jay, and we're going to go to our first break, but when we come back, we'll talk with the all-male black audience that we have here and get them to talk about the quest that black males face today. Stay with us.
at the Long Branch in Raleigh at 6:30 p.m. Wednesday, September 18th. For further information, contact Lucy Vance at 834-3586. The State Employment Security Commission introduces Jobs Line. With just one phone call, you can find out about the latest job openings. You have to be registered to participate. Contact your nearest ESC office or call 733-4329 and ask about Jobs Line. Send PSAs at least 2 weeks in advance to WAUG Information Line, PSA Coordinator, P.O. Box 14815, Raleigh, North Carolina 27620.
Celebrity Moments, sponsored by the United States Military Academy at West Point. Run DMC is one of the pioneers of rap music. They recently talked about why the music form has become so popular.
We like to rap because we don't sing.
Just like you can sing about a girl named Billie Jean.
You can talk about a girl named Billie Jean.
Just like you can sing about hard times.
You can rap about hard times. Just like you can sing about Don't Drive Drunk, we can rap about Don't Drive Drunk.
Would you like to get paid to attend college? If you're a high school graduate or soon will be, we urge you to take a close look at the United States Military Academy at West Point. At West Point, you'll benefit from a unique blend of college academics, a full 4-year scholarship, an annual salary, plus graduate as a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army. If you're looking for a rewarding...
Welcome back to the Talk of Raleigh. Again, our topic for today is the black male. Are we an endangered species? What we like to look at first from the onset is what are some of the issues that are confronting the black male's quest for survival? Do any of our audience guests here care to start out commenting on that?
Yes, Ron, I'd like to make a comment about that.
I'm Kamau Kambon, and I am in education. And I think one of the major issues facing the black male today is the issue of mental health. I believe that the psychology that we have as black men is a psychology of what I call subtle suicide. I don't believe that you can equate middle-classness with income. I think that the way we think is leading to our destruction. A lot of black men believe that by acquiring things, cars, homes, wealth, is a way to be successful in America. And I maintain that the more you get, or the deeper you get into the system, the more destructive it is to the black man psychologically. So I disagree with your statistics when you say the poor black man is in difficulty. I think all black men are endangered simply because of the way they think. And I'll talk more about that later on.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I should add Dr. Kambon is also an author and has books out, and so you may want to look out for some of his books that talk about these subjects in more detail.
Jay, what are some of the other issues that we'd like to look at now?
Well, I think in addition to the psychic and exploring all that, we want to look at the drug problems. We know that that's in the media a lot, the image of black males on drugs, not only the educational problem. We also want to talk about other issues such as employment, the criminal justice system, and other issues like that. So if any of you would like to do that, we'd like you to state your name first and go right into your comment.
My name is Frank Godfrey, and I'm a professor of business here at St. Augustine's College. And I'd like to piggyback on what Dr. Kambon just stated. I think that one of the main problems is education. If you look at the educational system right now, we have basically left the education of our African children, especially African-American male, to the Europeans. And you can never depend on those who are oppressing you to give you the necessary tools and skills which will assist you in your own liberation. So until and unless we begin to take back the schools, go back to the all African-American schools if necessary, with African-American teachers, administrators, and role models. The black coaches, for example, were very instrumental in assisting the African-American male in his struggle for survival in the system. Now there's very limited positive contact with African-American male role models in the school system and in society in general. And I'd just like to ask this audience, how many of you, we always sit around and talk about what we can do, but how many of us are actually trying to do something to reach out and touch a young brother and help him be uplifted in this society and teach him about how he's being oppressed? And maybe if we can do that, we'll get rid of all these swirls and curls and dyes and fries and become positive individuals in this society.
Okay. James had a question, a statement.
Yeah, I'm Jim Burt here at St. Augustine's College. I agree with both of my friends behind me. Also, I think there is a problem that we must address, and that is, I don't think we're going back to segregation. I don't think there's going to be an all-black educational system as it relates to the public schools. But I do think we have an opportunity in the black community to develop a program whereby we touch young black males in the community through fraternities, through the Masonic lodges, through even churches, men in churches. There ought to be developed programs where we can reach our brothers on a daily basis, 7 days a week, almost 24 hours, and not depend on someone else to do it for us.
We're talking about the education system here now, and we all know through the 60s we went through desegregation or integration, and many believe that that has been one of the problems towards the demise of not only the black male, but we know that at that time we had much more black principals. We talked about black coaches. We're on the campus of a historically black institution, but black institutions like St. Augustine's are also at risk right now too. Go right ahead.
Yes.
Just go ahead and talk. We can
my name is Eduardo Jackson. I'm a manager at a telecommunications firm here in Raleigh. In regards to the educational issue, I think definitely we've all touched on something here. We look at the lack of self-esteem that black people, black men in general sometimes have in themselves, and also in the black institutions of higher learning. You see a lot of people who feel that better education can come from, say, a Carolina than an A&T, and that's not necessarily so. Statistics, as a matter of fact, show that black students that attend black colleges do better at white graduate schools than black students who attend white undergraduate colleges. And I think it's up to the black institutions to let their presence be known, to let the students in the immediate areas see what they can do for them.
Okay, also one of the issues that I was looking at, I don't remember whether it was in Tony Brown's article or one of the articles that we had, one of the questions came up, an all-male black school for, say, elementary on up to about high school or so. That's something that I'd like for some of our guests to comment on. We have a couple of hands back here. You don't have to address that one at this time if you like, but it's something I'd like for you to think about and somebody comment on. I think we had two hands back here, and I saw you, Reverend, also. And Ben, I see.
Okay. I know we brought up the topic of, we got predominantly white school, and we got so-called historically black colleges. But I think when we look at the curriculum at either one of the schools, neither one of the schools are providing our students, our people with the knowledge of themselves. We talk about we got a Carolina, we got A&T, but when we look at the curriculum, if I go to State, I'm getting taught about Freud, and if I go to St. Augustine, sure, I'm getting taught about Freud. So when we look at the curriculum across the board, we're all getting taught about how to be somebody other than ourselves.
I'm Jason O'Boyd, a student here at St. Augustine's College. I had a chance to work at an Indianapolis Youth Detention Center, and it's not that our African-American young males are not smart. They are very smart, but yet they don't have any positive reinforcement. I had a chance to look at some of their math and reading scores, and they were reading on the 11.5 and 12.0 grade level, but yet they had no positive reinforcement, nobody there to stimulate them to go to school or to read books and to use their minds effectively. And they just ended up doing the wrong things. And getting back to what the other guest said, that it does take reaching back into your community and helping.
Okay, Reverend, we have a minute left. Could you make a quick comment quickly?
My comment is going to take longer than a minute. I'd like to, my name is Jack Lewis. I'm a pastor in Cary, North Carolina, and I agree with Dr. Godfrey and Dr. Kambon with the statements they made. And Dr. Godfrey asked, what are we doing to make a contribution to our young black African American males. And what I'm looking at right now, I work with the elementary schools where my son attends 2 or 3 days out of the week to work to serve as a role model for our young African American males that they do not see. When you go into the school systems, you see all the teachers in the elementary system, they're all females. Very seldom do you see a male role model or a counterpart there for our African American brothers. So therefore, they are searching and crying out for help. They need someone to serve as a role model for them, to show them that it's okay to be a young man, it's okay to be aggressive. Right now they're being taught and they're being pushed back saying that you're acting out, Johnny, or Jesse, you're not doing the right thing. But that is just the instinct of our African American male brothers. So we need to go out, as Dr. Godfrey said, and make a contribution. It's all right to talk about these things, but what are we doing to reach out and meet these needs that are so severely prevalent that we need to encourage our young men from elementary school on up that there are positive roles, that they are somebody, that they are smart, that they are very intelligent, and we are a proud people of our heritage. So I think once we reach out and start encouraging them, we can see a turnaround and a comeback of black African American males returning to the college campuses.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben. When we come back from this next break, we'll go ahead and see what burning desires you have to share also.
Ron, before you do that break, let me conclude with this comment as we're talking about education very briefly. Malcolm X said education is our passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to the people who prepare for it today.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Prevention of Cruelty to Animals will host the Roundup fundraiser at the Long Branch in Raleigh at 6:30 p.m. Wednesday, September 18th. For further information, contact Lucy Vance at 834-3586. The State Employment Security Commission introduces Jobs Line. With just one phone call, you can find out about the latest job openings. You have to be registered to participate. Contact your nearest ESC office or call 733-4329 and ask about Jobs Line. Send PSAs at least 2 weeks in advance to WAUG Information Line, PSA Coordinator, P.O. Box 14815, Raleigh, North Carolina 27620.
If this doesn't scare you, just wait.
The doctor will see you now.
One night a year ago, Vanessa got high with some guy and forgot everything she learned about preventing AIDS.
Welcome back to the Talk of Raleigh. Our topic is the black male. Are we an endangered species? My co-host for today is Jay Holloway. And before we went out to the break, Ben, you had a burning desire. Go ahead and share with us.
Well, I just wanted to just lay out a couple of quick points. First, I'm for the all-black male school. I think it's essential that black men have positive role models from the very beginning so that they can develop a firm foundation. Secondly, one of the controversies with the all-black male school has been something that's been termed the Afrocentric curriculum. I just like to lay the record straight and say that the Afrocentric curriculum is really just telling the truth where the truth needs to be heard. There have been a great many myths that have been portrayed in education in terms of the Greeks being the cradle of civilization, of all mathematics, of all science, of all literature stemming from the Greeks. Well, it stemmed from Africa. And so Afrocentric curriculum is really just telling the truth. And I think that not only do young black males need to hear that, but I think that the broad society needs to hear that too. I'd like to see a book, and some of you may have read it, it's called From Superman to Man by J.A. Rogers. I'd like to see that as essential reading at the 12th grade, or at least the 10th grade level. Okay. Because it lays out a point that, white people did not create this world. The cradle of civilization is in Africa. And secondly, I think that what we need to do is instill in young black males positive role models outside of schools. We are functioning in this country on an agrarian school system. In other words, we've got a school calendar that's based on the turn of the century when people worked the farms, when kids were essential, for farm labor. That just doesn't hold true today. Our 9-month calendar just isn't realistic when Japan and Germany are on a 12-month calendar. If the school system formally in this country can't provide that, I think that we need to provide that in a formal or informal manner for our young black men in after-school programs, summer programs, and even mentoring programs at the work site.
Okay, thanks so much for your comments, Ben. While we're situated this way, Mike, we'll go ahead and get your comments, and then we have two from the gentleman in the back here.
Okay, I'm Mike Dublin, and I serve as a minister here in Raleigh, as well as the Director of Prevention Services for a drug program. There are a couple of things that have been said that I find that I need to respond to. Is number one of the questions that was asked is, what are we doing? I think sometimes as we address the problems, we forget that there are ongoing solutions, that there are other people who recognize the problem and have taken steps to address those particular problems. One of the things that has been much aligned is the church, and yet consistently over the last thousands of years, the church has been there as an instrument to help develop young people. It was not very programmatic, and it didn't need to be programmatic, but those efforts have been made and are still being made today. And I realize that myself as a father, my role starts, and it may not be something that looks significant to anybody else, but my responsibility starts at home. So I've taken those steps in my own home, and that's very significant. And I also do it in the organization that I work with. I have some constraints, but in those constraints I do what I can do. So there are efforts being made by grassroots people who aren't written up, that don't get known, and there's a tendency to label black men think this way, middle class think that way, and then we're not getting anywhere in as far as solutions to the problem by, again, once we come to a certain knowledge, by labeling all black men as thinking one way or all by thinking the other. We do have some problems, but we do have some ongoing solutions to those problems that are being addressed.
As we're talking about solutions, I would like to remind our audience, that you're listening to AM 750 WAUG, and you can also watch this program if you happen to be listening on TV 68. So we invite our audiences in both radio and TV to watch the other medium or listen. And you can participate by calling us right now at 860-WAUG and participate with our in-studio discussion. We have another comment here.
I think that, I mentioned earlier that I think that one of the primary problems that we face is a problem of our mental health, the way we think in general. And I think that when we start looking at these, I call them mini systems, we start looking at education or the church, these are small entities, and I think that we are looking at the tree rather than looking at the forest. I think the big picture is, why do black men have a difficult time, not only in America, but across the face of the earth? And I believe the answer is that this is the plan, that there is a plan underway that didn't just start when we discovered the endangered black man. This plan has been underway from the time we were in the cradle of civilization. So the Europeans, the Arabs came in, and they destroyed the black civilization. So this is part of the plan, and we have to understand that. And my contention is that we are in a war. And we're the only people that don't know that we're in a war. And since we are in a war, we have to take the kind of action that's necessary to protect ourselves. And that protection comes through knowledge and education. And when we start talking about working with the black male at the age of 6 or 7 when he's in school, it's really too late for him then, because the media plays a large part in the destruction of the man simply by virtue of what it brings across the radio and the television. They destroy the identity of the man. You know, black is bad, white is good, and it goes on and on. It's in the fairy tales, it's in the textbooks, it's in the nursery rhymes, it's on TV. And so by the time that child, if that child has looked at TV from the age of 2 or 3 up to the age of 5, really psychologically he's finished. And we are playing a catch-up game after that. So I think that there's a lot out, there's a lot of genuine information, and there are authors that we ought to read, Francis Welsing, Dr. Ben Jacquinot. There are people that our people have never heard of that understand this system, and this system is bent on the destruction of the black male, and I think that's the standpoint we have to come from in trying to survive into the next century.
Thank you. I think Dr. Godfrey had a comment also.
Thank you. I'd like to also piggyback on what Dr. Kambon just said and suggest that you know, we're talking about the black man and the African-American man, but I don't think that we can use that generic term, because if you read Carter G. Woodson's book, The Miseducation of the Negro, some of the most dangerous individuals on the face of the earth are the African-Americans who have been miseducated and tend to miseducate our young people. So just to assume that because somebody is, quote, successful, that he or she will be a positive role model to some young brother or sister, I think is operating on a false premise. He or she could be more dangerous to that young person than a European. And in addition to that, I'd like to comment, since we do have 2 ministers in the audience, and I'm not attacking you specifically, but I know that it's prevalent in many African-American churches, well, I call them Negro churches, who have images on the wall of a white Christ. Now, if your God does not look like you, you are in trouble. So we can talk about all the things that we are doing, but I know in too many so-called black churches, when you walk in there, the first thing you see is a white image of Jesus. And if you actually would read the Bible, you would know that Jesus hid out in Egypt when Herod was after his head. Nobody with blonde hair and blue eyes and white skin could have effectively hidden out in Egypt during that time. And so if there's a white Christ on the walls of any of you black ministers, you're starting off from a lie.
Let me respond. And I think that what we're talking about is, and we've identified a problem, and again, there's a deeper problem in that you said that you're not trying to attack, but the reality of it is we're not going to solve any of the problems by the type of dialogue that we're getting here. There are people like myself who's totally aware of that, and when you start talking about the Negro church or the black church, then you're no different than the whites who label everybody, because our churches are just as individual, and there are those of us who are as well aware of the facts that you quoted as the rest of us. So we're not going to accomplish a whole lot by just tearing down blatantly. What we're here to try to do, as far as I understand, is to try to resolve some issues. And there are a lot of churches who are well aware and who teach that which needs to be taught, but greater than the skin color of the Christ, but what he actually taught, the value systems that cause us that in spite of the slavery, in spite of all of the slavery that takes place economically and everything else, that you can rise above that, and that you have the strength and the power available to you to be able to walk with that those characteristics. And I think that when we talk in terms of the conspiracy to destroy blacks, sometimes we try to make whites be gods. We give them credit for being so powerful that they can control the entire universe. I don't go for that. I believe that blacks have not only survived, but we've overcome, and we've set the standard of living, and sometimes we look beyond that. So the power that we have as African Americans, as Africans, to beat any system that has thrown against us has been made very evident by the fact that we are still sitting here. We do have some tremendous problems, but we have some very progressive and very strong people who've overcome those problems as well.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen, both for your comments. We do have a call. We want to go to the line. Hello, you're on the Talk of Raleigh.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment as far as being a black mother of 4 sons. And what important is that we have to begin at home, and I think someone made that statement. We live in America, and we speak English, so the first thing is that we have to make sure that our children have great communication skills. Because if you can't talk to someone, that's the first stigma that will eliminate our children in a lot of programs. Then also they have to have good values, and black women can really help out in that way because we are the homemakers and the ones that really train the children with the support of the father. But you can be successful without a father if that is the case. Then after our children go to school, we have to make sure that they take the advantage of the school system that's there. After they have done everything that they're supposed to do as far as making their grades and things of that nature, we have to make sure that the system does not brand them in any way, does not keep them out of certain programs. I know my husband and I have had to go to the superintendent and make sure that our son was not left out of a lot of programs because they do that to black males purposely. And what a lot of black parents don't understand is the power that that parents have, in the school system, and that all those free programs there should be a certain percentage per the population because of the fact that we are taxpayers. Once you've gotten them through the school system and on into college, then you have to make sure that they are strong, that they can be good leaders in their home and also in the community, and that they will give back. And we have one son that's going to be a teacher and another one that's going into computer programming. So again, I do believe that it starts at home. The battle is there. We have to support our children, make sure they have high self-esteem, and then we have to watch the system while they're going through it to be that great support mechanism for them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for calling, Dr. Godfrey. You had a comment, and
Yeah, I'd like to
got 2 minutes.
to the minister's response
Okay,
to what I said.
minutes.
I understand that. I'm not attacking churches when I say that, but just the point that Darrell made about the curricula at black colleges, for example. This is a fact that at most black colleges you can go there for 4 or 5, 6 years and never learn anything about yourself. That's a problem. And if there's a white Christ on the wall in a black church, that's a problem. And that's all I'm stating is a problem. Now, how you want to deal with that is up to the individual ministers. And I understand that there are some ministers who recognize that problem and they've taken that white image down. And it seems like we're always defensive to say that the images don't make any difference when there's a white Christ on church and a black wall. But I doubt very seriously that you'll go in any European churches and see an image of a black Christ on the wall because they know better.
Okay, we are going to kind of wind down for a second and go to our next break. We'll come back. Things are really getting inspiring. We want to close with a comment from Jay. Jay, please give us a quick...
A couple of comments. We had a female caller call in and talk about the role of the black woman, which I think we'd like to address as well. There also was an article in Ebony Man talking about the black woman being the foundation of the black man, and I would like to pose this question to our audience. If the black woman is the foundation, is her presence or her absence also responsible for our existence today or being endangered? A question that we like to raise. Also, regardless of what we're talking about here, we're also talking about a struggle. And there is a quote that I'd like to read from Frederick Douglass, and I'll summarize it real quickly. The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, it never will. Men may not get all they pay for in this world, but they must certainly pay for all they get. You're watching WAUG TV 68 and listening to AM 750. We'll be right back, Ron, with the Talk of Raleigh live.
We're here to help Hungarian teachers learn how to teach English. It's an amazing time to be here. For these people, English is the language of opportunity, and they can't get enough of it.
How are you doing today?
Great. But language isn't the only thing we share. I'm learning Hungarians are a lot like we are. They love their freedom, and they're open to new ideas.
Words of freedom, and the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
We all have a lot of work ahead of us, but I can't think of any job I'd rather have.
Be part of the future with the Peace Schooler, the toughest job you'll ever love.
There is a mighty spirit shining out.
In Salisbury, Maryland, the hungry are being fed. In Wind Falls, Indiana, The man who learned to read at 47 is making sure others learn earlier. In Hope, New Mexico, people turned an abandoned school into a thriving community center. In Boston, Massachusetts, neighbors set up a crime hotline that's making their streets safer. From Seattle to Galveston, from Buffalo to Fargo, every day, someone in America is...
Welcome back to the Talk of Raleigh. I'm Ron E. Lewis, your host. My co-host for today is Jay Holloway. Our topic is the black male. Are we an endangered species? We're going to take right up from where we left off. I believe, Charles, you had a comment you wanted to make?
My name is Charles Hogan, and I head up a community development program, specifically the Minority Business Development Center, and I wanted to address the problem of the black male and endangered species from a historical point of view. This country was founded on a class of Europeans that were oppressed and came over and saw that there was a fertile land and they needed someone to produce the land agriculturally and mining, and they actually imported the Afro-American to this country to do the work. And the whole economic system is based on oppressing the black male. And until we realize that we can't fight the system, or we can't do things in an oppressive state, we need to find our own way of doing things and then collectively, not individually, try to reach out, but we need to collectively band together and do things our way. Until we've come to that point, then the black male will be an endangered species because the European race is not going to allow him to raise himself up.
I think we had a caller earlier, female caller, talk about the problems of being active in the school, the role of the black woman, the black family at home and starting from home, and I believe we had a comment relating to that here.
My name is Cy Four, and pertaining to what the young lady, the caller that called in today, I personally believe that the black woman does have a very, very strong part in playing with the success of the black man. It has been 400 years, if you go back to history, 400 years of hell and struggle for the black race. And if you look through the time of history, the black woman has always been there. As a matter of fact, she's the one who's always been crying out to us. When we were placed into the little cabinets and stuff like that, and the white man would come down and misuse her and everything, she was there crying for us. We lost that whole concept of turning around and saying to the sister, look, I'm here for you and you should be here for me, and let's work together to make this thing work. And I believe that if we get back into that knit, and going back again to the motherland, where you have the mother there to help assist the black man in the bringing up his sons and directing them, this is where we have blacks going into schools today being strong people. You know, it starts from the home. You know, if your parents are very strong in bringing you up, and they demand or enforce the kind of right upbringings in you, you are going to turn out, hopefully, to be the right kind of person. So all that ties in where the mother can't do it by herself, the man cannot do it by himself, so we need each other. So I think she plays a very important part in this.
Thank you, Si. We have a call, so we're going to go to the lines again. And hello, you're on the Talk of Raleigh. Good morning.
Good morning. I wanted to just say that I believe the black woman has brought the black man a long way. But to touch on a few issues that you've already talked about, this oppression thing, I think that we're beyond that point. I think I want to ask the question, when is that the talk of slavery and everything just going to be, I mean, we'll never forget it, but when will we be beyond that point and say that, you know, it's time for the blacks to go ahead and take the rise that, you know, not has been given to them, but something that we've all fought for. I mean, we have forefathers ahead of us who've done a great deal of things. I mean, we've struggled and we've done this. And when are the blacks going to be ahead and stop saying, okay, the white man is still taking us over, it's still a white man's world, this and that? When will the black man take a rise and take a stand and, you know, be able to not say, okay, this is a white thing? When will we be able to say it's a black thing because we work for it and we're still working for it? Because when you go into the job market, you have to work 3 times as hard as a white person. When will we be able to say, okay, we've worked hard, now it's our time? Why is it always when black men get together, I mean, it's the same old thing, oppression, and we're under this rule and we're under that rule?
Caller.
Yes.
Let us, we've got 16 black men in here. Let's pose that question and let them respond, because we've got an audience that's dying to respond to your question.
Okay.
When will the black man stop crying that?
And we certainly thank you for your call. Darrell had his hand. He's been waiting for quite some time. Spud, I acknowledge you, and these gentlemen over here want to respond too. Darrell?
I think going back to what the first young lady said, first caller, she was talking about teaching her kid to communicate effectively. I think we're talking about a double consciousness, and we say that, okay, I want my kid to be able to communicate effectively, but what happens when he steps out in an environment with his friends that he plays with, and he's communicating a certain way and he can't relate? So when we talk about that double consciousness, we think we should have the ability to, yeah, let's get around here and talk and be able to communicate with our brothers and sisters. But when we have to get in another environment, let's be able to do it too. So, but I think we've spent so much time on that other side of our consciousness, that American consciousness, we don't know nothing about ourselves. And I think the underlying problem, like Dr. Kambon was saying, is mental health. But do we know who we really are? You know, we talk about a black woman to black man. Newsweek magazine in 1988 has already said, hey, okay, the human race evolved out of a black-skinned woman. Now, I think when sisters read that, they should understand, okay, the race came out of me. So that is enough, I think, in itself that we start getting a connection with who we are. They're telling us who we are, but let us tap into who we are.
Okay, Spud?
Okay, my name is Charles Pierce. I'm a student here at St. Augustine's College. Firstly, going back to what Dr. Kambon had said earlier, it goes back to mental health. When you constantly hear statistics about the number of black men in prison, the number of black men on drugs, alcoholics, and dysfunctional families, that only can be that is a detrimental to the black male. Firstly, you need to hear about the black men that are in college, the black men that are actually out there doing some things. Going back to what the caller said, she said that why do we constantly talk about why we're oppressed? Why do we constantly talk about when black men get together, it's the same old, same old? Firstly, everyone needs to be aware 16 men here are just a small minority out of thousands of black men. They need to know, and everyone doesn't believe it. George Washington Carver said, "This land is ours by right of birth. This land is ours by right of toil. Our sweat is in its virgin earth. Our blood is in its fruitful toil." If this land is ours, then why don't we have a part of the so-called American dream? We live here, we work here, we die here, yet we constantly are oppressed. We're constantly told to step back. We have double standards. Black women are hired in positions where black men are just as qualified, but black women feel two qualifications. They're black and they're women. They're double minorities. That's the type of society we live in. That's why black males have gripes, and that's why black males want to express their opinions to everyone so that they will know what we know.
Okay. I think the caller, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
I heard you trying to make a comment.
Well, I've kind of lost that first comment, except to say that, I don't know. What he just said about the oppression thing, I was meaning it as, I didn't mean it as black females are taking those positions now and they're getting it because they're black and female. Because in the 60s, it seems to me that blacks had opportunities to go to grad school, had opportunities to go, to higher education, and a lot of blacks got lazy. They didn't take that opportunity. So, a lot of people drop down. Okay, the blacks drop down. And when talking about the second person, black people are like scorpions. When they do get in a higher position, they pull each other back. Instead of helping everybody, they pull each other back. Or they keep on going, they excel, while everybody else, is left down here at the bottom.
Okay, we've got several males here again, and some of them haven't had a chance to have a comment at all, so we need to get to those that desire to make statements also. So we thank you for calling, and we're going to go ahead and allow them to respond to your question and any other statements that they would like to make. I think we have. Go ahead, sir.
First of all, I'm
Introduce yourself.
Eric Curry. I work for a local radio station in this area. And to get back to what that last caller was saying, she brought up a good point, and I'm not sure if she really got to the main point that she wanted to make, and that was we make excuses for our mistakes. And we always want to blame someone else for those mistakes. For instance, the recent incident where Hosea Williams in Georgia is caught with a DWI. He wants to blame the media for that mistake. As black men in this society, as well as African American citizens all across this country, we have to remember that we're always watched.
Okay, Mr. Curry, we'll come back with you. Hold your thought. All right. We have one more quote, and we're going to go out to our next break.
I think one of the things we ought to be looking at next, and this author here, and I'll tell you who it is when we finish reading it, states it very well. Our people have made the mistake of confusing the methods with the objectives. As long as we agree on objectives, we should never fall out with each other just because we believe in different methods or tactics or strategy to reach a common objective. We have to keep in mind all the times that we are not fighting for integration, nor are we fighting for separation. We're fighting for the recognition as free humans in this society. That's Malcolm X. This is the Talk of Raleigh. You're listening to AM 750 and TV 68. We'll be right back, and hopefully we can talk about the solutions, the methods, and objectives.
A wonderful world.
When I grow up, I want the air to be clean and everyone to love each other. And I want everyone to be healthy so they live to be very, very old.
Many people have joined in the fight against HIV, the virus that causes AIDS, and progress is being made. But the disease is still spreading, and only you can stop it. Only you have the power to prevent it from happening to you. Are we all going to fight, or are we just going to let the disease spread further?
I just want to grow up in a better world.
Learn how you can prevent HIV infection. Call 1-800-342-AIDS.
WAUG Information Line. The Raleigh Symphony Orchestra presents Symphonisaurus on Sunday, September 15th at 4 p.m. in Raleigh's Memorial Auditorium. For further information, contact Virginia Zier at 832-5120. The Wake County Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals will host a Roundup fundraiser at the Long Branch in Raleigh at 6:30 p.m. Wednesday, September 18th. For further information, contact Lucy Vance at 834-3586. The State Employment Security Commission introduces Jobs Line. With just one phone call, you can find out about the latest job openings. You have to be registered to participate. Contact your nearest ESC office or call 733-4...
Welcome back to the Talk of Raleigh. I'm Ron Lewis, and our co-host, of course, is Mr. Jay Holloway. We're discussing the black male. Are we an endangered species? We have a caller. We're going to go straight to the line. Good morning. How are you? Good morning. How are you?
Yes, fine. How are you?
Okay. Welcome to the Talk of Raleigh. Go right ahead.
I realize that the white man has definitely been an oppressing factor. However, I would like to know if we are just using the white man as an excuse for our oppression. My question is, when is the black man going to take responsibility for some of his own oppression and work together to rise above it?
Okay, thank you for your question, and we're going to go straight to the males. Jay, you had a comment on your last quote, and we'll just go ahead from there.
Right. I think it's interesting. We've had three callers in a row from African-American females, but we do want to remind our audience that this subject is on the black male. We appreciate the calls. We would like to take this last segment to focus back in on our specific topic of the black male. Are we an endangered species? Focus on the specific objectives and methods of addressing that issue. And I think Dr. Kambon has a question, a comment.
Very quickly, and kind of in response to what the sisters had to say, I think that we'll continue to focus on this issue about the black male as long as a brother like Philip Pennell, who was 15 years old, and he was murdered in New Jersey by a white policeman. Rodney King, I don't have to tell you about. And then Yusuf Hawkins was murdered. So I think that we are at war, and as long as we are at war, we'll have to continue to focus on what is going on with respect to the black male. The other issues I think that we haven't talked about today that we have to touch on, one of the reasons that I think that we are committing subtle suicide, I think there's an external plan and an internal plan to destroy us. It relates to two things. One is the culture. We don't really have a culture. We operate under the European culture. We continue to celebrate European holidays. I can't imagine how we have gone through everything that we've gone through, and we celebrate Christmas, Thanksgiving, and these holidays don't have anything to do with us. So I think we really have to clean up our act and get an identity. We have to find out who we are, because we are running around like Europeans. So, and the other point that we haven't talked about is health. We're killing ourselves by continuing to eat this pork, this contaminated chicken, sugar. So we are an endangered species, and I think beyond that, we're really in the process of being exterminated. Until we change our diet and get our culture in order, we will be on the verge of extinction.
Tell us where we can read more about that.
Well, of course, I've got this information contained in my books, Black Guerrilla Warfare in America, Tips on How Africans Can Commit Subtle Suicide, and Food, Health, and You. But there are a host of brothers and sisters around the country, Francis Welsing, Dr. Ben Jockinnon, Naeem Akbar, Ivan Van Sertima. They're spread around the country. They understand the system. Our people don't read. We don't understand the big picture. And as long as we don't understand the big picture, we'll focus on these mini systems and not see what's really going on.
Okay, and I noticed from your comment that in one of the articles that we use for research for this show that in Ebony it commented at age 65 that the black female is expected to live an additional 17 years, but at age 65 the black male is expected to live only an additional 14 more years, and of course it still drops quite a bit when we compare those stats to our people of European American descent. Also, we talked about in terms of solution, economic empowerment, jobs. We also touched on the judicial system. So if anybody wanted to comment on that and indoctrinated it into their comments towards the solution, please feel free to do so. This gentleman here, I know has been waiting patiently for a while.
This is getting back to the issue of slavery. I know that sometimes people do have a tendency to blame everything on slavery, but it's a known fact that we are still feeling the effects of slavery today. Slavery should never be forgotten. The Europeans knew what they were doing when they took the black male away, when they just sold families. They destroyed the basic unit. The basic unit, I believe, is the family. And the Europeans took that away and stripped, in the process, they stripped all culture and many things. And we still are feeling this today. And history has a tendency to repeat itself. And if you look at today's society, black males are in the same situation, almost as slavery. You know, they're being dragged into bad situations, and there's so many factors working against them in society that it can almost be juxtaposed right next to slavery.
Okay. You have another comment on the front row here.
I was just going to tie into that and say that system that takes the black male away is that very same oppressive system that's called assistance, where it's more financially beneficial for a woman to not have a male in her household and have 5, 6, 7, or 8 kids than it is to have a male there. When she has a male there, she gets less money. And so it's the same structural system to pull the black male away that we saw in slavery.
Okay, while we're there, Mike, go ahead and make your comment, then we'll flip to the other side.
I just wanted to say in regard to all of the things that we said, I really appreciate the comments of the ladies who've called in, because as we focus on the system and all of the oppression, I'm still accountable today to whether I do cocaine, whether I'm unfaithful to my wife, whether I hate somebody else, or whatever I do. I'm accountable. I've suffered all of those things. I've been a migrant worker. I've gone through everything that everybody else here. But yet internally, I know that there's a God that created me, that has given me the power and the strength to overcome those things. And maybe my diet is not the greatest in the world, and maybe all those other factors. But I don't believe that every African American is so out of it that only a few of them know what's going on. But we're just not willing to accept that there are African American families that are very strong, that go down through generations, that have a lot to offer, that there are institutions such as some of the churches, and that we don't want to incorporate that as a part of the solution, but we have, some of us have made up our minds as to what the solution is. And if you have a curl, then you aren't a part of the solution. If you have this. So we've gone now and decided who is going to be black and who is not, and we have our own decisions. But I'm convinced today that every African American male and female can make the choices to overcome anything that comes their way. I think that it's been demonstrated in the character of African Americans, Africans throughout history, and that will continue as long as we take the responsibility in spite of all of the other oppressions that go on around us.
Taking responsibility for ourselves. You have a comment related to that? Or no?
Exactly related to that. I think that we put too much emphasis on genocide caused by anyone other than ourselves. I think we have to think that if we were to be destroyed as a race, then we would have to take into consideration that a lot of that would be from the things that we do. I would imagine that the majority of the black men who are shot by other black men, not white men. The majority of the drugs that are bought in this country, I'm sure they're flown over by white men, but the brothers that buy it, I don't know if they buy it from white men. You know, you had spoken briefly earlier on black women being the foundation of black men. Why can't we be our own foundation? Definitely, we have to take responsibility for everything we do. When we talk about what happened as a child, sure, we were children then, but we're all men now. And everything that we do now is because we made the choice to do that.
In these last few minutes, can we talk about what some of the objectives are? Because next week we will continue with this discussion and talk about racial genocide, about the whole mental health issue and that kind of thing. Can we talk about what are some of our objectives? What do we all agree on or disagree on? Hopefully we can agree on some of the objectives, although we may differ in the methods.
Okay. Ron, I'd like to agree again with Dr. Kambon with learning how to take care of ourselves. We as an African American people, once we obtain knowledge, the scriptures say if a man lack knowledge and wisdom, let him ask it of God. And God has used us as instruments to make things aware to our brothers and sisters. As the books that he had mentioned that are written, we should take it upon ourselves to see what is proper for our health, to see what is good for our children. These are our responsibilities. And I feel that if we continue in this way, these are some of the objectives that we can overcome the obstacles that have been placed in front of us by the European Caucasian, even though they are still waiting for us to go down, but there is a way out. And the way out is to learn to read and to obtain more knowledge for ourselves. And once we obtain the knowledge, once you have knowledge, that is something that you obtain that no one can take away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend. And we're out of time. We thank all of you all for your comments. Needless to say, this topic is too in-depth for us to try to do it in one show. So next week, we shall continue with the black male. Are we an endangered species? And you gentlemen shall be included. We thank you all for your comments for this show. And also, we thank all of our callers. We thank you for listening, for viewing again. Jay, close us out with another quote from a person that wasn't able to be with us today.
And that is Frederick Douglass. And I would like to say under the topic of self-determination, our destiny is largely in our own hands. If we find we shall have to seek, if we succeed in the race of life, it must be by our own energies and our own exertions. Others may clear the road, but we must go forward or be left behind in the race of life. If we remain poor and dependent, the riches of other men will not avail us. If we are ignorant, the intelligence of other men will do but little for us. If we are foolish, the wisdom of other men will not guide us. If we are wasteful of time and money, the economy of other men will only make us our destitution the more graceful and hurtful. That's Frederick Douglass. And of course, on next week, we will continue the discussion of the black male, and we will concentrate specifically on the black male relationships, racial genocide, and self-esteem. And we hope hopefully that you will join us again for the Talk of Raleigh next week on AM 750 and TV 68. We'd like to thank our guest, in-studio guest. Hopefully they will join us next week. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you. Join us next week.
The views and opinions expressed on the Talk of Raleigh are not necessarily those of WAUG or St. Augustine's College. Join us next week for the Talk of Raleigh on AM 750, WAUG, and TV 68.
It's not very good. They don't take and black males, white males.
All right.
White males.
Is that better?
Yeah, that sounds good.
The Talk of Raleigh. Provocative. The Talk of Raleigh. In focus with issues that directly affect our listeners in the Raleigh and surrounding areas. Join us now for the Talk of Raleigh, live on AM 750 WAUG and TV 68. The Talk of Raleigh.
Hello and welcome again to the Talk of Raleigh. I'm your host, Ron Lewis, and our guest again is Mr. Jay Holloway. We are still discussing the topic, the black male. Are we an endangered species? Okay, we still have our audience of all Afro-American males, and we're going to jump straight into the issues. Again, we want to address what are the issues confronting the black male's quest for survival, and we want solutions to those. So the audience that we have today will be giving us what are the issues confronting black males' quest for survival and what they see as being the solutions. Jay.
So, and of course, we would like to stick with those two subjects. We'll be doing a continuous session here, and we'd like to stick to what are the issues, because we realize that we may not all agree on what the key issues are, but we certainly have opinions, and we'd like to hear from our distinguished guests on the issues. And we'd also like you, when you give one of the issues that you think are of primary concern, to share with us what do you think the solution is as well. And we will conclude with summarizing those comments, and we can move right to that. What are some of the issues and solutions facing us as black males in our quest for survival? Dr. Godfrey.
Well, I'd like to say that one of the issues, not only facing the black male, but the African American in general, is a lack of self-knowledge. So I think that the struggle will have to begin with the individual. Marcus Garvey once said that people without a knowledge of their history and culture is like a tree without roots. It basically has no life, or it will wither and die. So if we are to survive and live, we have to begin with a solid foundation, and that's self-knowledge. The knowledge that we are an African people, and that's where civilization began. Because I think that one of the main problems we have among ourselves as a people is a lack of self-knowledge, and that plays off in a lack of self-esteem. And as a result of having low self-esteem, we do foolish things without thinking about our actions. If we could get back in touch with our history, I think that would be one solution that we can already
And how do we
What Dr. Godfrey has said is true. You know, Martin Luther King said the ultimate measure of a person is not when they stand in moments of comfort, but when they stand in moments of controversy. And as black men, we've been controversial for 400 years. And for some reason, we have gotten very comfortable. And we must raise those issues and deal with those issues and find the solutions, because we'll never be comfortable in this society. So I think we have to get the mindset that, hey, we may have some material things and we're growing, but we're never going to be comfortable until we as a community come together, collectively, the Afro-American community, come together and assist each other and participate in helping us to be better.
Now, that's an issue, a lack of self-knowledge and self-esteem. How do we go about actually doing that, Dr. Godfrey and other guests? What is the solution? Dr. Kambon.
I think when you talk about a lack of self-knowledge, last week we talked, I think one of the panelists talked about the fact that a lot of us believe that civilization started in Greece and in Rome. But part of it, I think, we have to move away from the divisions, the things that separate us. It starts with fraternities, sororities, the different religious denominations, the titles, you know, somebody has a doctorate, so they're supposed to be smart. We have to, I think, get away from all of these titles because these things have been created to divide us and keep us separate. There's a class division. There's even a color thing among us, from what I understand. I don't know about that, but I understand that there's a color thing among us. So I think that one of the fundamental things that's important to do is to build a foundation, as Dr. Godfrey said, based on culture, based on a culture. We have to move away, as I always point out, from these holidays that have nothing to do with us. Ron Karenga out of California has developed a philosophy called Kawaida, the base of which is Kwanzaa, and it has the 7 principles. Kujichagulia, self-determination. We have to define ourselves, speak for ourselves, and name ourselves. So, I mean, it's a whole mental set that we have to develop for ourselves, including moving away from European names. So we're European from top to bottom.
So you see as one of the solutions a power definition?
We have to define ourselves.
Okay, okay.
Daryl. I think we talking what Dr. Kambon and Dr. Godfrey were talking about as far as self-knowledge. I think we need to talk about solutions. We need to think about rites of passage programs. Rites of Passage programs coming out of our churches, coming out during the summer. We need to be having these young brothers in these Rites of Passage programs and bring them through. But if you could talk about starting a Rites of Passage program, you got to have a base. You can't start a Rites of Passage program and you yourself, you're messed up. And see, I think the brothers who are talking about starting this program got to have a base. You know, we've already stated that a brother himself can mess up another little brother because he don't have knowledge of himself. So I think that Rites of Passage program and different programs on our college campus to study groups, talking about our history, because history has been used as a weapon against us, and we haven't even realized it, because we've been made obsolete in history.
Okay, so as one of the solutions, you see that we need Afrocentric curriculum and give us our, from the ground level up, empowering us through education. Okay. Ben.
I think another thing that we need to become more focused on is our own economics. You know, as a people, you know, black people in the United States are wealthy in terms of the resources they have compared to the rest of the world, but yet we're solely dependent on another culture for our own survival. We need, if we want to improve our own employment and economic status, to begin to develop our own businesses, develop our own cooperative economic systems, to develop systems that we can raise up young leaders, raise up craftsmen and tradesmen and business leaders through our own ranks rather than relying on Harvard MBA school to do it for us.
Okay.
We're talking about the economic issue, and I brought this topic up on last session, but it has been noted in major media that there are 2 black Americas, you know, and that the economic is more divisive than the actual color in some instances. And that's not my viewpoint. That is what was read, and I'd like to hear your comments on that. We're talking about economics, but that divides us. Now, we heard from Dr. Kambon saying that one of the solutions is to take away these barriers, and that perhaps, you know, the color of our skin, we have more in common than the difference between our income. And I'd like for some discussion on that. We're talking about economics as an issue now. What are some other solutions to that problem?
When we talk about economics, when we talk about businesses, of course, owning our own business is definitely a thing that we've got to do. But we talk about black persons who are in management and fields like that, who sometimes feel that if they were to go out and talk to that employee that may be just a college graduate and tell them what they might need to do as opposed to assisting the white person, then we fear for our jobs. We've got to overcome that. We've got to go out and try to make a difference regardless of what could possibly happen to us. I think that if more of us took a stand in helping that other black man up the ladder, then we would be in more control of our
economic situation.
Okay, and in fairness to the viewing and listening audience, Jay, when you talk in terms of, from the article, I think it was Tony Brown's one about two black Americas, define the two for those that may be lost as to what the two are.
Well, I think what the article was referring to, there was a recent study, and I forget, some of our audience may be more familiar with this than I am, but a recent research group in Washington, D.C. did a study in America, and Tony Brown did a commentary on that. That there are two separate black Americas. There's the middle class, and there is the poor black. And that when we talk about the problems of black males on drugs and the criminal justice system, that it is not a total black problem, but that is a poor black problem. And I would like for our black males to address that issue. And that in many instances, this article even quoted once about a business owner or gentleman in corporate America in Washington, D.C., and he says that he went to a bank in Washington, D.C. to get a loan for about $15,000 and was turned down, but he didn't feel comfortable in talking to some of his other colleagues about that because they can't identify. You mean you can't get a $15,000 loan and I'm trying to eat tomorrow, you know? Okay. I think that's the gist of that article.
Okay, could we go with Dr. Godfrey, Spud, and Seth?
Okay, I'd like to respond to that, and this sort of piggybacks on what Dr. Kambon said. This whole social class scenario is another way of design to divide and conquer us. In reality, there are two classes in America, the haves and the have-nots. And, you know, some of you might think that you're in a middle class, and the only thing that makes you middle class is you about 1 or 2 paychecks from being homeless. Whereas somebody who's in the lower class are 1 paycheck away, and that's the basic distinction. But we need to realize that there are haves and have-nots. If your money is working for you, you are have. If you're working for money, you are have-not.
They had addressed the economic issue. One of the biggest problems is first of all, the social classification and the economic stratification. They have all been here. The only difference was when we were forced to live in our own communities, you didn't see it as much. When, say, a banker living down the street had to live right beside the janitor that cleaned his bank, you saw his house was better, he dressed a little bit better, but everyone was right there in the same community. We were forced to shop at our own stores, go to our own cleaners because whites just didn't want to clean to do the things that we do. With integration, you see that those that had moved out of the neighborhoods and they left those that couldn't move there. And so now everyone is saying, we see this, but the problem has still been there. And the only way to combat that is for us to go back into our own communities, to support our own business and get the myth out of our head that everything white is not right. I mean, we constantly believe that I can't go to this black cleaner because he can't clean as well as this white man can clean silk, or say silk. We have to say, well, I have to support this brother because at least his funds are going back into the community because he is supporting those 3 black women that are back there cleaning my silk shirt. That's the type of things that's part of the solution to our big problem.
Okay, so you see part of the solution is turning the dollars back over in our community.
I'm sure the article stated that the more endangered black man is the poor black man. Well, this problem that we're facing here today is a problem that sits upon the shoulder of every black man, whether you're poor or whether you're rich. And let me give you an example of a so-called rich or middle-class black man that now has his name just totally messed up, all right, is the mayor of D.C. Now, he is a middle-class black man. Look at the situation he got caught up in. You see, the thing here is we're causing ourselves to fall captives of what the white man would call, I'm feeding it to him. I'm just going to leave them alone and let him demoralize, totally kill themselves out. And it's not a poor rich thing. If you look around you, the poor brother, even though he may not have, there are many days that he goes happy because he doesn't have anybody over his head watching him and has a gun pointed to him. As long as he has his mind correct, and this is where we all come back to education. We can educate the poor black man to be self-sufficient just as the same way we can educate the rich or middle-class black man to be self-sufficient. We have to educate ourselves. Education is the most important thing, because without education, we move into the next step, which would be racial genocide.
So you agree that there is somewhat of a division there, but you're saying that the issue is upon all black men's shoulders, but the issue should be educating ourselves to pull us out?
I agree that the division comes by a system, the system which the white man has put upon us, which is, if you're in this class level, you're considered to be better than the person who is 1 or 2 paychecks less than you. That's not our concept. It should never be.
Okay. James?
I think another part of a solution in our community is that those who we employ, those who get their livelihood from us, I'll just use an example. You have ministers, you have funeral directors, you have many other enterprises right in the black community that a white person is not going to use that business. So therefore, we should demand from those individuals to be leaders in our communities, to help us develop our community the way we're crying. But that's not the case. I take it and I'm sort of through with many of them. And I think we need to bring their conscious level to the point that you owe something back to this community because we're giving something to you. You know, there are some churches that close 6 days a week. You know, they ought to have programs to educate not only their congregation, but that community. And it could be economic, it could be education, it could be health, it could be the total realm of what we deal with every day as a human being.
Okay, so you see one of the solutions as giving back from those that have given to you. I'd like to stop and do something right quick here, Jay. The brother here was in both segments and hasn't made any comments. I'm not trying to put you on the spot or anything, but certainly what you have to say is as valuable as anybody else that's here. Would you like to make a statement at all?
Well, basically, listening to what they're saying is benefiting me because of my profession. I'm an admissions counselor here at a historically black college, and I go out into the high schools, and what we're saying is true. These things can be done, but what we need to think about, like Dr. Godfrey said, self-esteem. We need to first look at the solutions. We need to first look at the individual. If you don't believe in yourself, nobody can tell me to come to a certain community event, to do certain things. If I don't believe in myself that I can be a middle-class person or someone, then there's no need in me. You know, that's what our problem is today. Society has told the black youth. See, we're sitting here, most of us are professionals, and we go out and deal with other professional people. We need to first think about what can help the young people. Those are the ones that are killing each other. Those are the ones that are our future. And they see now in a picture of all I need is a Mercedes, sell drugs, and I make big money. They don't think about education like we had to think about. So it's more or less of, an individual thing than more or less of us saying, I mean, what we're saying is true. We can come together to help, but if the individual don't believe in themselves, then it's worthless.
Thank you.
We have another comment right here.
Yeah, I guess listening to all of the colleagues here in this room today, a lot of good points, and I think one good point that needs to be made, most folks never think about the most successful economic and educational enterprise in this country has been the black colleges and universities. Number one, if you support a black college and university, not only as a student with your dollars, but at the same time with your resources, like Dr. Godfrey and other educators across this country are doing on a black campus, you're not only educating and trying to support and maintain a black institution in our communities, but at the same time, you're reaching out and you're helping someone else try to do the same things. And I think hard work, you have to thank your parents, you have to thank your ministers, and you have to thank black colleges and universities for being in existence. And I only give a charge to the students that may be viewing this. I mean, don't think that going to classes and packed with books Monday through Fridays and then going out on the weekends with a gun packed, smoking and drinking, and you turn around and go back to class on Monday, think that, okay, you're setting a little facade for the short term, but long term, it's going to tear you up, but really tear up the black community. So I think the charge that we all have to make is we have to reach out. If it's just one person a month, we have to reach out to that one person.
We had talked about economics as a solution, and I think that one of the things that we
in terms of looking at the big picture, and we're talking about the endangered black male. See, America is on the verge of economic collapse, in my estimation. And because it's on the verge of this collapse, it is intensifying its efforts at white supremacy. It's consolidating in Eastern Europe. This is why Russia is trying to get together with America. So since they're trying to consolidate and they are intensifying their efforts at white supremacy across the earth, then we have to start looking at different models of economics. If we get money, I think that we need to start looking at bartering, exchanging goods for services, services for services, because the dollar is broke. The dollar doesn't buy anything. In fact, it's worthless as far as I'm concerned. So we have to start bartering. If we do get money, we have to take that money and put it in land. We have to start to feed ourselves. And we talked last week, we have to change our diets. We're not going to be able to run out to these supermarkets when this thing comes down and buy steaks and all that. We have to be able to go 3 and 4 days without eating any food. And I think that a word to the wise is sufficient. I'd rather be prepared. I'd rather be 5 years too early than 1 second too late. So we have to change our whole analogy of what success means. Invest in land. We have to start growing our food for ourselves. And we have to do a whole host of things if we're going to survive just economically.
Okay, go ahead.
Economics, certainly a serious issue here in changing our buying habits. Do you like to talk about economics, or is there another issue?
I'd just like to belabor that point about economics and the state of the economy. I agree wholeheartedly that we are in a really distressful state, and they're reaching out in every way they can to try to generate a boost to the economy. We need to take advantage of some of the short-term programs that are available, the affirmative action programs and the goals programs and the funds that are available to us to allow us to get into that system and learn how things are being done. I work for such an agency, the Minority Business Development Center, and you can come in and learn how we've been doing these things all of the time, but you can learn how to do these things and be profitable and be uplifting. And once you are into the system, and then it's important to do things for ourselves and give back to the community. So I just wanted to reinforce that concept.
Tell us how we can get in contact and find more information about the Minority Business Development Center.
Well, the Minority Business Development Center is here in Raleigh on 817 New Bern Avenue. We're having an open house ceremony Monday and a construction seminar. There are a host of activities going on next week, but the doors are open from 8:30 to 5, 817 New Bern Avenue.
Okay, let me add too, Jay, that by the time our viewers see this show, that activity will have passed, but certainly they are at 817 New Bern Avenue on the corner of New Bern Avenue and Ottawa Avenue. I think you had two behind you, too.
I'd like to make a comment on the economic situation that we're faced with now. From a spiritual aspect, I totally agree with what the rest of our colleagues have stated here. So far as turning the dollar over and putting it back into the community from which it came. And I also feel that, to add to some of the things that Dr. Burt stated, that we must learn to go to our brother's business when a mistake has been made, we're not pleased with the service, rather than to go out and to talk about the brother and make business bad for him, is to go to him and chastise him and get the problem corrected and then return as a satisfied customer. We do the same thing with the European Caucasian. So we must learn to do that with our brothers. If we are dissatisfied with the problem, with the service, then go back and get the service corrected and continue your business with your brother. And also, so far as the churches, that is a true statement. There are a lot of churches that are closed 6 days a week, and we continue to talk about the problems. I would like to take this opportunity to invite anyone in the listening audience and our brothers here today to come to Mount Zion Baptist Church in Cary, where we have a tutorial program for our school-age children. We have services of different types going on just about every day and night during the week. We are a full-time church there, and anything that you would like to bring in as a program that would be beneficial to our brothers and sisters, to train them and to teach them how to deal with this economic factor that we're dealing with now, you are more than welcome. And we would like for these things to continue, because this is where we have to keep our power is lying within our churches, within our black institutions, where we can feel free to give the information that we know that our people need, that we won't have to worry about getting out on the other end.
The gentleman beside want to make a comment too.
Yeah, I'd like to take on really three issues: the historically black college, the economics, and education. I think one thing that could be constructed, particularly with a collaboration of historically black colleges, i.e. United Negro College Fund or some other entity, is help young black families develop savings plans for their kids and investments plans within a system. There are some colleges in the Midwest that have done that. They've formed collaboratives where the parents basically, from the time the child is born, invest a certain amount of money, on a monthly basis, yearly basis, whatever, knowing that, at the end of 18 years, there is a sum of money there that has been invested that's available for that child to go to education, to get a higher education in college. In other words, that parent is already instilling in that child's mind that, there's money available for you to go to college. College is in the plan. And they have, several options of schools that they can attend. And I think that would help with economics, it would help with education, it would also help to secure a long-term future for the historically black college.
Okay, Mike, and also Dr. Godfrey's hand is up, and I'll get you. Okay, Mike.
Well, I just think that it's very important to, again, recognize that there are institutions that are helping in these particular areas. And one of the things that has bothered me is we continue to, even when the survey is being taken, we start to immediately talk about the survey as who's middle class and who's poor. We fall right into that trap. The everyday person has to take some responsibility, and there are a lot of people who are actually taking responsibility. And if you talk about African American history, you should also talk about what's going on currently in Africa. They're not walking around talking about trying to be like the Europeans. They want their freedom and their dignity, and they demand it. So even when they're in their shanties, they're demanding that. And I'm hearing us talk about setting up college programs. So in a way, we're still feeding into your value. It's based on whether you go to college or not. At the same time, we're knocking it. We're still feeding into that same system. The spiritual value that tells you that you are somebody and that no human being created you, that allows you to rise above that. And currently in Africa now, there are those who are not only surviving physically, but spiritually and emotionally, and they're not ashamed of who they are, and they don't have all these material goods until a person's spiritual value, their very basics of who they are, has to take place as we address in all of these other particular issues.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Hey, this comment is getting back towards education. I'd like to stress that prior to economics, if you were to walk into any lower-income housing area or any ghetto and were to just give a black man $1 million, he probably would end up blowing it and not know how to use his money effectively. So we must learn how to use our money effectively so we can invest in the right things and purchase the things that we need, not necessarily just like a Mercedes-Benz or whatever. Things that will help in the future, like Dr. Kambon said, land or something that's going to provide some longevity. That's all.
Okay, Dr. Godfrey, he's been waiting patiently. You can use that mic in front of you, Dr.
Okay. One other thing I'd like to make, this is off economics. The educational system basically trains individuals to be individuals. And the American dream is to own a house, 2 cars, a white poodle, and live in suburbia America. That's the American dream. So if I spend my entire educational period going through that process, and I go to work for IBM for 30 years, and I put all my energies in IBM, I'm basically cooled out. I can be ineffective. You have a lot of doctors now who refuse to go and work in rural communities to help with the health care system. You have lawyers who are more concerned about owning 2 Jaguars and a 4,000 square foot house as opposed to going into the prison systems and trying to help these brothers who lack proper legal counseling, and that's why they're in there in the first place. So we have to get at a mindset where we have to start teaching our children that the reason why you are earning these so-called degrees and educational credentials is to go back and reach back and try to uplift somebody who was less fortunate than you were and make sure that their health and rights as human beings are protected as a result of your educational experience?
Okay. I know Ben had another comment. But we'll go ahead and get you to.
Well, since we're talking about education, one of the things that I wanted to focus on was the fact that, as Mike put it, that, you know, there's a class system that develops when you start talking about education versus the uneducated. But I think when historically black colleges were first developed, they had more options for folks in terms of being able to develop skills rather than just that pure academic knowledge. I know I had an uncle who went to Hampton and he learned how to be a builder. Okay, he learned a building trade there. You could, in the past, you could learn trades at the historically black colleges. Now, you know, you get the book knowledge, but I think we do need to get back to controlling our own institutions and being able to provide a broad spectrum of education that helps sustain us independently as a society.
Thank you. And I think the dialogue that we're having here is really good. Going back to, as we were saying, addressing the issues, then coming up with solutions, and that a lot of what I'm hearing is pretty much what I think Booker T. Washington, W.E. Du Bois was saying. Both had a solution to the problem, an issue from another perspective. So I think the dialogue that we're stimulating here is, we're coming up with some things here.
One thing I can suggest as a student, and I see this constantly, the older African-American leadership needs to encourage the younger brothers and sisters coming along instead of stifling them and saying, well, we don't do this that way. We haven't done it that way. We need to start to tell them, well, that's a possibility. Maybe we can try it. Constantly you see Martin Luther King, when he started out at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, he was stifled by the older church leadership. They wanted to stifle him because this was too radical. Instead, we need to cultivate, we need to nurture these students and teach them that this is right, but there's a way of going about it. Your ideas are well taken, instead of just slamming against the wall and locking them away.
Well, you mentioned Booker T. Washington, and I've been famous the last show of giving us some quotes here, and I do have a quote from Booker T. Washington speaking to the issue as well, if I could just take a few minutes. Patiently, quietly, doggedly, persistently, through summer and winter, sunshine and shadow, by self-sacrifice, by foresight, by honest and industry, we must reinforce argument with results. One farm bought, one house built, one home sweetly and intelligently kept, one man who is largely a taxpayer or has the largest bank account, one school or church maintained, one factory running successfully, one truck garden profitably cultivated, one patient cured by a Negro doctor, one sermon well preached, one office well filed, one life cleanly lived. These will tell more in our favor than all the abstract eloquence that can be summoned to plead our case. Our pathway must be up through the soil, up through the swamps, up through the forests, up through the streams, the rocks, up through commerce, education, and religion.
Okay, great. We had a hand up front.
Yeah,
go ahead, Darryl.
I mean, we talk about economics, we talk about education. And I think the underlying factor, as far as us being effective in those areas, is love of self. I think the underlying factor, when we begin to love ourselves, I think we're getting past the problem. I think love of self will make you or cause you focus you in that direction of patronizing the brother's business. You know, a lot of times we rather run to Red Lobster rather than get the brother's fish. We rather go to Red Lobster than Charleston Seafood. So I think underlying love of self is a problem that we're dealing with. When we come to love ourselves and appreciate ourselves and fight like hell to defend ourselves, we're going to be in a better position.
Okay.
I think, you know, you listen to our concerns and what we have to say, but at the same time, there are some positive messages. There are positive examples of African Americans coming together. And at the same time, I've noticed, and I believe everyone else in here has probably noticed, driving around, seeing some of the whites and how they try to take what we have, whether it's by dress, whether it's by music. And I was, it kind of made me chuckle a little bit. About a week ago, I was in the mall, and I saw a white female with a T-shirt. It's a white thing you wouldn't understand, with a Confederate flag on the back. So they're out there, and I laughed, and she probably felt like she was standing up for some cause. But you don't want to respect that, but then again, that's there, and you just have to deal with it. So I believe now more than ever, we have to realize that, you know, they're out there talking about us at their luncheon meetings at the Capital City Club. They're out in the hills, and I'm not talking about Biltmore Hills. And at the same time, we have to get together and do the same things and try to come together and quit the bickering that we have in our communities because they feed on it and they love it.
Okay, one of the things that we want to touch on too before we close and do our wrap up is the black male, his responsibility or his relationship and role in the black family. So as we give also comments addressing the issues and solutions, if some of you all would care to comment on that, it would be appreciated. We're going to have Dr. Kambon and then Mike.
Well, in regard to the black man and the family, I think that one of the issues that we really haven't touched on today deals with the media and the role of the media in terms of brainwashing our people. And I'm talking about when you see the black man on television, he's a clown, he's a buffoon, he's a drug addict, or he's a policeman, or he's in the military. And this stereotypes our people. It makes our children think that black men don't do anything, that they're not worth anything. So we really have to focus on the media in terms of the television programs, because our people don't write the scripts on a lot of these so-called programs on television. So they're trying to undermine the self-esteem and the identity of the children. And then you have the radio programs with the rock music. And all they do all day long is they blast these commercials at our people to try to get our people to spend money they don't have, to drink, to party, and to get high. So if we're going to solve the problem, we have to focus on the media. We have to really educate our people, because our people generally don't have the kind of insight and education because they haven't had the familiarity with how the system is operating. So if we're going to build a family, we have to shut the TV off, and we really have to start to educate our people about what is harmful and what is not harmful.
Except for programs like this.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, I'd like to emphasize that there are in our country today thousands upon thousands of African-American families where the males are present and they are taking their role and they are the role models for their youth. Again, we focus quite a bit on those who don't have role models, and we tend to forget about those who do. And I think, again, we've bit right into that same situation, which is tear down and continuing to help tear down the family, when in fact the family is intact, that there are African-American families that have mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles, and they are raising their communities. They're coming back at their family reunions. They've taught those values, and their role models are not the television commercials. They are affected by them like everybody is, but we do have solid families, and each African-American man must recognize his role as the head of his house, his responsibility that goes with that, and then that means accepting his personal responsibility for his own spiritual growth.
Thank you. I want this brother here, you had some excellent comments in the last show, and I know you're not sitting here without some comments, or at least some thoughts that you'd like to make. Let's get you to make a comment, and then we'll go with the others.
I'd like to touch on specifically the black man as the father. I think that it is the responsibility of the father, the black father, to not tell his son, you are as good as, but to tell his son, you are better than. I don't think that in a lot of races, creeds, what have you, fathers are telling their son, you can be as good as. We've got to understand that we are, as black people, have overcome more difficulties, more trials and tribulations than any race, and continue to do so. And for all those fathers that are in a stable, intact family, they need to make that effort and let their children know who they are and what they can be.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Godfrey has a comment.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. Here again, we are buying into another divisiveness in the community. You know, we're talking about the intact family, which suggests that if you don't have a nuclear family with the husband and wife present, then something bad is necessarily going to come out of that. Some of the best kids that I have ever encountered in the classroom came from broken homes, so to speak. So that's another title that they have placed, which makes you think that if the husband and wife are not living together, then the children are going to actually come out negative. Some of the worst kids I've ever seen have come out of these so-called nuclear families where everybody is upright and respectable and highly educated. So there's nothing that suggests that one is better than the other. And what we need to do is understand that a family is any two people or three or four, whatever, living together under one roof with common goals and objectives and ties, whether that's led by a woman, a man, or whether it's led by an adult sibling. So we need to get away from that too.
So, Doc, you're saying whatever environment you may come from, it still is a family, and you need
right.
the family still should function
That's
as
right.
a family.
A lot of positive things can come out of that.
And we recognize that, but we also have to be very much aware that in every society, the man is the head, and our society and our race is no different. And we don't want to get away from, again, making the African-American male be non-useful. If anybody can be identified as family, then again, you're saying, well, why should we have to have it? I'm saying it is very critical for the African-American male to assume the role that he has, which is a God-given role, to, in fact, demonstrate and the character building, to lead his family, and to be responsible. If there is a child, a man had to help produce that child. He should be responsible one way or the other. And so however you define it, the African-American male, like all males, have a role and responsibility, and they must assume that role and responsibility.
Okay, you got a comment?
Yes, and also as a man who comes from a non-intact family, in other words, I was raised solely by my grandmother, I think it would have been easier on her if there was that male person there to serve as a role model. I'm not suggesting that a family, be it an aunt, uncle, or father, mother, whatever the case, is any less helpful than any other situation. But I think that since we are talking about what we need to do as men, we have to understand that one thing that we should talk about is what we need to do as fathers.
Okay. Son.
Listening again to all the comments that have been made, we must also focus on the point that what we're discussing today is not who's capable and how bad we've been, but being a minority, being a species of people that are about to be extinct. What we are looking at, I feel, is that we're looking at solutions as to how we can inform more and more African American males their roles and responsibilities as the head of the household. And by informing them, they will go out. It's like a discipling thing. Once you have discipled one and taught him, he will go and disciple others and teach them, and it will become a broad spectrum. And being a minority, what we are looking at is to come together and form a unified group that can function spiritually, socially, economically, in all areas and aspects as we are here in this European country. We are not saying that African American males are less, or that because we are where we are, we've already arrived. We have a long way to go to get there. And the reason we have a long way is because we have to reach back and to reach out and bring our brothers up to standard as to the knowing of their responsibility of the head of the household. The scripture charged that a man shall live by the sweat of his brow. That means that he is in charge of that household, making sure that that wife and those children are taken care of. So as African American men, we do have a great responsibility, and we are better than the average man or the next man, because I feel that we are God's chosen people.
Okay, thanks so much.
Let me just make sure, Dr. Godfrey, you are not promoting one style over the other. You were just saying just because you do not have that full family intact does not mean you cannot.
That's right.
Yeah, certainly we don't want us to think that any statement that was made is an indictment on anybody. And I think we tried to allude to that when we talked about, we had W.E.D. Boys. Also, we have other gentlemen, Booker T. Washington, and each one had an answer to the solution of the problem as they saw it, and both of them merited, and a combination of the two certainly would help a lot. Time to wrap up, Jay. Help me, I'm not as young as I used to be. We need to see if we can come up with some of the solutions. We want to just bring together what we've had here.
Well,
I remember that from some we heard economic empowerment, from some we heard giving back to the community, we heard the rites of passage, also Afrocentric curriculum. In other words, let's look at some of these solutions that we have
some quick
now.
notes here. We talk about the lack of self-knowledge initially, and the issue of lack of self-knowledge in education, that we need to look at creating a foundation and not separate ourselves. We looked at having the rites of passage, as you talked about, having summer programs that we can share these issues with. We talked about the subject of economics as well, having our own business, have those businesses be leaders, return to our own communities, education, giving back, supporting the black college, looking at bartering, trying to acquire land, also looking at collaborations, investments in educational institutions, looking at correcting when we have black businesses that are not doing well, going back and telling them so that we can correct them and go back and patronize that business. We also talked about the media stereotypes. What can we do on focusing on that and to change that and educate more? Looking at the family, creating role models, male head of the households. What is the father's responsibility? And tell your son that you can be better and do better. Those are some of the things we talked about.
Certainly, and some of the others that came up, of course, is the power of definition. And we heard some terms that came up that we didn't have enough time to really look at. Some things like black-on-black crime, blackballing, blacklisting. I'm not using the exact terms, but I heard some terms come up. Minority, certain words that certainly could have been addressed also as far as how it affects the issues that we're discussing today. We'd like to thank each and every one of you all for participating in the black male. Are we an endangered species? And the comments have certainly gained much merit, and we hope from it we have some solutions. We'll see you next time on The Talk of Raleigh.
The Talk of Raleigh. Provocative. The Talk of Raleigh. In focus with issues that directly affect our viewers and listeners in Raleigh and the surrounding areas. Join us now for of Raleigh, live on AM 750 and TV 68. The Talk of Raleigh.